We must stop the terror. I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
All right, you need another. Our new speaker. You right? What? Trying to be talked out of the mug.
See you at church.
Good time, sir.
We have Glenn Greenwald. He was on the Vanguard the other day, and he did a really great job swatting down the notion that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is in any way similar to the United States invasion of Iraq. So Crystal and Sagar were named as the people to respond to, but this is a common concept. I've seen a lot of liberals and even leftists, so-called leftists, repeating this talking point. Kyle Kalinske repeating this talking point. And I think he does a really good job debunking it, laying it to rest. So let's hear what he's got to say.
I was watching some of Crystal and Sagar's coverage on Breaking Points this morning, and at one point they compared this invasion of Ukraine to America's invasion of Iraq, saying there's no justification for Putin's actions. How would you respond to such a comparison in light of the context you just laid out for us?
Well, first of all, I actually find the comparison offensive, to be honest. I love Sagar and Crystal, but so it's not like they're the only ones making it. I find it offensive because I think it minimizes what a moral atrocity the invasion of Iraq was. The United States did not invade a bordering country that was the venue for all kinds of shenanigans and interference on the part of their long-standing greatest rival. The United States packed up a military of hundreds of thousands of troops and went all the way to the other side of the world and invaded a country that in no way was ever a threat to the United States. No one even pretended or argued that, other than through what we all now know was the fraud of Iraqi WMDs. And even if Iraq had a WMD program, the idea that that would have been a direct threat to the United States, was itself a lie. So there was zero plausible reason to view Iraq as a threat to the United States, a country all the way on the other side of the world that had a military, a tiny fraction of what the United States was, that had never shown any interest or...
Iraq in no way, shape, or form was a threat to the national security of the United States of America. It was an item, a list on their agenda. It was not, a potential threat.
Propensity to attack the United States. What you have here is a completely different situation. Aside from the idea of NATO expansion, which we just talked about, we have to remember...
So we did a video on that here. NATO expansion is a huge reason why this crisis has been inflamed, but let's let Glenn continue.
That the United States has been basically the colonial masters of Ukraine since at least 2014, when you want to call it a revolution, some people call it a coup, whatever you want to call it, there was a change of government from a government that was more or less neutral.
We'll do a video covering the Maidan coup in 2014, where the U.S. helped back a violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government that was more neutral and was kind of playing the EU and Russia off of each other for economic deals. But let's continue.
Or leaning toward Moscow, to one that was very pro-EU. And, we all know about the scandal, the ethical scandal involving Hunter Biden, but it's worth revisiting because it sheds light on the reality of the situation, which was, why did Burisma, think it was worth it to pay Hunter Biden $50,000 a month, $600,000 a year to sit on the board of that company, despite the fact that he had zero competence in or knowledge of any energy industry, let alone Ukrainian energy. It was because his dad at the time was basically like the consul, like the colonial overseer of Ukraine. Like part of Joe Biden's portfolio as vice president under the Obama administration was to rule Ukraine.
That's right, Jack. Better believe it. He beat the shit out of Corn Pop and got to be the consul of Ukraine.
You know, there was a phone call between Victoria Nuland.
When he was under president, you know his name. What's his face? Barack Obama. Or whatever. You know the thing. Come on, you know the thing, guys.
The then U.S. ambassador to Ukraine that leaked, in which they were plotting which president they thought was best and that they wanted to install. Biden was literally micromanaging Ukrainian governance. He was picking and choosing which prosecutors needed to be fired and which ones needed to be hired. The U.S. was actively involved in taking Ukraine and turning it into like a vassal state of the United States, right on not just the Russian border, but the most sensitive region of the Russian border, which was the launching ground for two different cataclysmic wars that were from attacks by Germany twice in the 20th century that led to the death.
Something Americans can't even conceive of. I mean, my fellow New Yorkers can kind of understand what it's like to be attacked, if they're old enough to remember. But the shock of, a mass destruction of your country or neighborhood, mass loss of life, is not something Americans understand, really. Imagine if 2 times China invaded us through Mexico historically, and then next thing you know, China is meddling with Mexican affairs and overthrowing their government and pumping billions of dollars of weapons and helping train and arm, right-wing death squads. What happens then? Americans really need to learn how to walk a mile in another man's shoes, so to speak.
Of tens of millions of Russians through Ukraine, the most sensitive spot for Russia. So it's not just this NATO expansion encircling Russia or the threat of putting Ukraine in NATO. It's also what the United States was actually doing in Ukraine, changing its government, micromanaging all.
And then I'll put to the side of that the economics of Nord Stream, pipelines, European gas dependence, all of that stuff. But Glenn is right. It's NATO expansion. It's meddling directly in Ukrainian affairs, overthrowing governments and pumping billions of dollars of weapons into that country.
Its resources very close to the Russian border that again made very patriotic and, respected members of the U.S. security state aware that what we were doing in Ukraine was a grave threat, an actual direct threat, not just a perceived one, but a direct threat to Russia in a way that nobody could ever claim was the case for Iraq. Now, that doesn't mean that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is justified. I mean, you could still say they were both unjustified. So I guess in that sense, you could compare them if you just create a broad category of unjustified attacks and throw both Ukraine and Iraq into it. Okay, that's fine.
It's a long list.
The comparison ends there because no one reasonable can contest the fact that Russia has a much stronger case why their national security was imperiled by what was happening in Ukraine than the U.S. did vis-a-vis Iraq in 2003.
So there you have it. The Iraq War is a non-comparison, people. That is far more a war of aggression and imperialism than you could ever make the case for this Russian invasion of Ukraine. No one goaded us into Iraq. No one backed us into a corner where Iraq is the only way out. Iraq isn't on our border, you know, it's like 7,000 miles away or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Iraq's on the other side of the world. Ukraine is literally on Russia's border. Crystal Sagar completely getting it wrong. Kyle completely getting it wrong. Vaush, all those idiots completely getting this wrong. I've only seen a few people get it right. I've seen Jimmy Dore get it right, Aaron Mate, The Gray Zone, Jackson Hinkle. If I'm missing others who are getting it right, sorry for not shouting you out. I just haven't seen you. But, yeah, there you have it. Glenn Greenwald, once again, you know, just perfectly explaining how preposterous some of these liberal ideologies really are becoming. It's ridiculous. It's very ridiculous. I think Trump has really broken everyone's brain, and he's forced a political realignment, and it's insane to see in real time.